Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 16th February 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin here with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Just in time delivery. Where are we going to start? There is so much happening, and I think we're going to try really hard in today's news to help people see through what is increasing froth and chaos swirling all around us. But people are often saying to us, what is the good news? So let's kick off with the good news. And thank you very much to yet another UK Column member that sent me an email. And this was the headline: BBC to pursue cuts of up to 600 million as bosses point to fall in licence fee income. So let's get that up as a banner headline. 300,000, another 300,000 households have decided that the BBC is not for them. They are not paying the licence fee. And what is the result? A 600 million hit for the BBC. So anybody ever wants good news, this just shows what the power of ordinary people doing a simple action together. This can make a huge effect. What do you think, Ben?
I think these people all need to be put into re-education camps.
Indeed.
How could you not pay your licence fee? Appalling.
Well, it's true. But we got a result there, so we'll kick off today's news with that and let you think about it. Now, we're going to get straight back into the subject of Epstein because this is where a huge amount of the froth and turbulence is. BBC headline here: Bondi criticised after saying all Epstein files have been released. This clearly is not true, because within the Department of Justice itself, it acknowledged that this second release was not going to be all the files. But let's have a look at what the BBC actually said in that article, if we pop that one back on screen. So it gives names: Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and Bill Clinton are included in the list. All had documented past relationships with Epstein and Maxwell. And then, of course, what everybody has to say, including the UK column: there's no suggestion that appearing in the documents implies any wrongdoing, and each has denied any involvement in Epstein's war crimes. But look at this, shock horror. The list also includes the names of deceased musicians Janis Joplin and Elvis Presley. So the BBC getting really excited here, because they can now, I'm going to use the word, smear the lists, smear the horror of what was actually done to young women, demonstrated by the Epstein releases. The BBC is going to bring in Janis Joplin, tremendously important, and Elvis Presley. It is quite astonishing what the BBC is prepared to do. And maybe it's such a good thing that 300,000 households have decided they're going to switch off. Now, let's just compare what the BBC has been doing with the Daily Mail, because the Daily Mail seems to be blowing hot and cold. So we've got a front page here, and I've said that the Daily Mail is blurring the importance of Epstein with dross over Lisa and Ant and a reunion to grieve their beloved dog. That's the real headline to grab people's attention. And then under Epstein, it's so what are the police waiting for? And that's the focus absolutely on Prince Andrew. And then, of course, you've got more low-grade stuff on the Winter Olympics, all put in juxtaposition on a front page, which is going to confuse people's minds. Let's bring up another Daily Mail report. This one's got more substance in it. Sorry, here we are. Let's bring that one up. And so this is actually talking about the Epstein files with a lot of emotional music. But you noticed in the image that they choose to use, there's a teddy bear. So is this some sort of crude reflection that it was young women who were being abused? Or is somebody with a sort of sick sense of humour about what the Epstein affair is really about. Now, of course, we don't know, but this is a common theme of many of the press editions in UK when they do this sort of thing. Now, having said that, credit to the Daily Mail, because the Daily Mail has had the courage to actually bring up, you won't be able to see these names on screen. We'll make sure that you can actually find the Daily Mail article in the show notes. But here is the list of the names as released by Pam Bondi. And now we can see, of course, that this involves a huge number of people, very, very powerful people in the political circles, in business, and in between, and much greater than simply Andrew. But what the documents don't do in the release from the United States is actually give some basic details as to who these people are and what their significance is. Nevertheless, the fact their names have come out does allow people to go back into the Department of Justice database to search each and every one of those names to see what's really being said about them. Now, how do we describe what's happening? There's this release of millions of documents. There is the press swirling around. There's the public. There's bloggers. There's analytical channels on YouTube. What we now have is an absolute froth around the Epstein case. And what we can't see is if there's any police investigation actually taking place, whether it's in the UK side or the US side. So let's bring a little video on screen. It is silent. I'll talk you through it, but this is the best that UK Column could do to describe what we've actually got happening here. So this is a feeding frenzy. It would be a feeding frenzy if the seals could get hold of the herring, but they're having trouble. So let's bring this on screen and just play this little clip through, because if it'll run for us, what we see is the body politics and the public represented by the SEALs. They're desperately trying to get the froth, the shoal of the Epstein files, but every time it moves away from them. So you've got chaos and confusion as the public and the press and politics are feeding or trying to feed on the Epstein files. Meanwhile, those fish, the evidence within those files gets away. So for me, as I've tried to get to grips with what this release of the Epstein material is all about, you see that the more the frenzy is around it, the less there's any real police or FBI action to investigate the original crimes.
That's certainly the case. And also, very little focus on the serious implications for the establishment policy agenda, I would say. So there's two names that jumped out at me that I couldn't actually see on that list that you put up a moment ago that are in the files, because I saw them over the weekend. And there was a dinner hosted back in, I believe it was 2010, which had Len Blavatnik attending and also Michael Bloomberg. Len Blavatnik is the funder of the Blavatnik School of Government at the University of Oxford, which is basically training the current managerial class in British and international politics, as well as he funded the extension of the Tate Modern building, which is where Keir Starmer chose to hold the electoral victory party after the general election. When Starmer was voted in as Prime Minister, they held it at the Blavatnik building at the Tate. And also Michael Bloomberg, who is the primary funder of C40 Cities, which is Sadiq Khan's actual job. He's not really the mayor of London. He's the co-president or co-chief executive of C40 Cities. And Michael Bloomberg has also put enormous amounts of money into the Earthshot Prize, which is Prince William's international vehicle for progressing his climate agenda.
Yeah.
Right. So, and actually, there's a lot of links into things like impact investment that we've spoken about previously, and even into the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals themselves. So the people that have been formulating those and progressing them are named in the files, but they don't want to talk about that. They just want to talk about Prince Andrew and a bit of Trump and a couple of other things, but just headlines. Deliberately so.
Deliberately so.
Yeah.
Now, just for one example, we're limited in the amount of time we've got in the news, but we're going to bring up one of the released emails. Let's pop this one up on screen. If we can just expand it a bit. So these are released from the FBI themselves. It then says, re Clinton, in the main SS, there was mention of an orgy with Tony Blair. Can you cut and paste that? Now, remember that whatever's said in any of these documents does not mean anybody has done anything. We are focusing on what the FBI have actually been saying. And if we bring more on screen, then we can see a whole list of names. We've got Trump, we've got Weinstein, we've got Prince Andrew, we've got Glenn Dublin, Jez Stately, and Leon Black dropping off the end of the screen here. But there's some really serious things about here to do with abuse and rough sex. And at the moment, is anybody investigating possible crimes carried out here? We simply don't know, because it's gone into that froth that we can't see through. If we bring up the second page of the particular email, we've got talk about back massages. We've got an accusation of rape. We've got very, very serious things being talked about. A whole heap of other names have now come on screen. But of course, we don't know exactly what's going on. One email here says, thank you. Can you write me a sentence or two for the below? Are the salacious statements made against the individuals in the file? Feel free to add if I missed someone. So nobody's being accused of anything, but the key point is that we, the public, do not know whether there's even an investigation going on at the moment into what appears to possibly be very serious accusations in some cases. And if we just bring up the last one, and these you can find yourself in the Department of Justice releases, it says, good morning. I did not find an interview of Nicholas Tartaglini, Epstein's cellmate, during his first suicide attempt documented in Sentinel. Please reach out to case agent Amanda Gildea for additional information. So clearly there were things going on inside the cell which the wider public haven't been talked about. But meanwhile, the media in UK and indeed worldwide focus in on tiny salacious bits. So this is the Metro saying that Jeffrey Epstein had become fixated with a British TV star after his release from prison, and yet there's no comment on the real detail of what's actually happening in those releases. So I've done my best with that analogy of the shoal of fish, which is the Epstein files. Everybody's trying to chase it to get the real meat of what's going on, but the whole thing just keeps moving around. And I wonder whether they've deliberately been released in this very ad hoc, haphazard form in order to make sure that the public and indeed official bodies can't get to grips with the evidence that is really there in the release. Over to you, Ben.
Should we just go to war and forget about it?
Well, I think that's where they want us to go.
Probably what they'd like us to do, exactly. So on Friday, Mike mentioned that the Munich Security Conference was taking place and showed a few of these little images. We can get this running. We can see this is some of their communication. The world has entered an era of wrecking ball politics. There's Trump, the wrecking ball. And the question that they're asking is, can destruction be creative? That's quite a question, isn't it? And or are we witnessing the end of progress? So Trump apparently is going to disrupt progress, the great progress towards this supposed utopian future that no one actually really understands or can describe and probably can't be built. And is it time for us to address the elephants in the room from a geopolitical perspective? Right, and the world is apparently under destruction at the moment, and the collective leadership of Europe and further afield come together. This was just, as I said, on Friday through to Sunday last week. And this is an event that's been backed by the German government and has been running since the 1960s. And it describes itself as the world's leading forum for debating international security policy. It's got an extraordinary advisory council overseeing it. We can see a few names here. Chrystia Freeland, so former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and now Special Representative for the Reconstruction of Ukraine. She's one of the co-chairs, so I think that's very telling. This reconstruction of Ukraine keeps on coming up. Also, Carl Bildt, the co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations, which was established originally by George Soros. There's very, very heavy Soros involvement in this whole thing. We also have Joe Kaiser, chairman of the supervisory board at Siemens Energy, which is a World Economic Forum partner, very interested in the reconstruction of Ukraine, I'm sure. Kaya Kallis from the European Union, who we're going to come back to shortly. John Kerry, David Miliband, Nancy Pelosi. She's on the advisory council.
Well, that's useful.
Absolutely, yes. Maybe this will be feeding into her extraordinary portfolio returns that she's seen over the past several decades. So a big-time progressive liberal establishment council overseeing this, and then backed by an extraordinary array of multinational corporations. And we can just see here, I'll pull out a few names as they whiz past, right? But we can see Bloomberg in the mix, I just mentioned, Anduril, which is Peter Thiel's AI offering, or one of them. Google are in there sponsoring, Accenture, Amazon Web Services, BCG, Deloitte, PwC, EY, Palantir, YouTube, BMW. Who else have we got? Bloomberg, yes, Deloitte are in there, Goldman Sachs, the Open Societies Foundation. So when they say that war is a racket, this is what we mean. Yeah.
Right. And let's just remind the audience, Ben, and when we look at the Epstein files and we see a swirling mix of powerful people in politics and people within big global companies, some of which have appeared on screen, is it any wonder that there's clearly this massive attempt to suppress what Epstein files really mean and really show?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, Keir Starmer was there to deliver a keynote address. Let's have a little listen to his opening remarks.
Ursula, thank you for that presentation. It's always a real pleasure to follow you on this stage as we work ever more closely together. Ladies and gentlemen, for many years, for most people in the United Kingdom, war has been remote, something that concerns us deeply, but which happens far away. But now we feel the solidity of peace, the very ground that we stand on, softening under our feet. It is the job of leaders to be ahead of these seismic shifts. Yet that is against the grain of history. Time and again, leaders have looked the other way, only rearming when disaster is upon them. This time must be different.
So we've got to get ahead of history and rearm now.
Or follow Hitler, who rearmed in order to start the war.
Yes, well, maybe he's appealing to Hitler. Maybe that's what Starmer's going for, because apparently there is an inevitable conflict with Russia on the horizon. The whole of Europe is going to come into a state of conflict, open war with Russia at some point between now and the end of the decade. It's kind of presented as this inevitability. And Britain is going to be absolutely at the heart of European security. Starmer said explicitly, as we can see here, that there is no British security without Europe and no European security without Britain. That is the lesson of history and is today's reality as well. So together we must rise to this moment. We must spend more, critical word there, spend, deliver more, and coordinate more. And what he's alluding to is what has been reported on the UK column for many years now. We've spoken about it, particularly over the past 18 months or so, which is this drive towards total militarization of the economic system. He talks about this idea of NATO becoming more European. He does appeal to the United States. So he holds out a fig leaf to Trump and basically says that we are grateful, we need this, we need you involved in this. But ultimately, NATO is going to become more European. Europe is a sleeping giant from an economic perspective that would dwarf the Russian economy 10 to 1. And this needs to be harnessed through closer economic alignment, with the UK placed at the centre of European industrial renewal, and all of this done in an understanding that, as he puts it in the speech, hard power is the currency of the age. And I think we should just examine Keir Starmer projecting hard power. Look at it, hard power for Mr. Starmer. I'm sure Putin is quaking in his boots. But anyway, Brian, you've got a couple of clips from the speech to share as well, haven't you?
Yeah, there's so much emerging here. But EU military unification was something that the UK column warned about. Nobody else would speak about it. But this is now coming to the surface again. This was always the European Union plan for the formation of a single European military power. But yeah, Keir Starmer in the ring. Oh my goodness. Let's have a listen to another clip of him speaking.
We are not the Britain of the Brexit years anymore, because we know and that is because we know that in a dangerous world, we would not take control by turning inward. We would surrender it. And I won't let that happen. And that's why I devote time as Prime Minister to Britain's leadership on the world stage. And that's why I'm here today. Because I am clear, there is no British security without Europe, and no European security without Britain. That is the lesson of history, and is today's reality as well.
So there we are, very interesting little clip. We won't take control by turning inwards. Well, we would be taking control if we turned inwards, so that our own parliament was making the core decisions to protect the nation state. But of course, Starmer has said very clearly to the BBC that Davos to him is more important than Westminster. So we've got a Prime Minister absolutely will not tell the truth to the nation about what he's doing. And then, of course, Britain dependent on the European Union, because we've given away our military industrial base to build what is needed to defend the nation. And I know there'll be some of our viewers and listeners thinking, yeah, but we don't want more war, but we're heading towards war, even on the basis that we can't protect ourselves because that potential has been given away. Meanwhile, we have utter chaos now emerging between NATO and the European Union. Let's have a listen to this next clip with Rutte trying to talk his way out of the American position, which is, you Europeans just get on with it.
The mindset is that you now see the Europeans taking more the lead when it comes to NATO and Europe. The Europeans really stepping up when it comes to defending Europe, and therefore the US being more anchored in NATO. Because finally we are dealing with what they wanted us to deal with, the Europeans, and that was spending more and taking more of the leadership role. For NATO to be strong, you need a strong European pillar. Nobody wants to break the bond with the United States. There's nobody who really wants that. You want to maintain that relationship, because for the United States to stay stable and strong and secure, they need NATO, because they need a strong and secure Europe, they need a strong and secure Arctic, they need a strong and secure Atlantic. For the US, for its own safety and security.
So either this man is living his own illusion, or he is a complete idiot, because the Americans do not need Europe in the way that he's suggesting. This is utter desperation now that Trump has pointed a finger at Europe and said, basically, you get on with it. And Rutte, on one hand, now is left alienated by the Americans, and clearly he's desperate. And on the other hand, as we'll see in a minute, we've basically got the fight between NATO and this EU military unification. I don't know whether you picked up in that little video clip, Ben, but he mentioned the word pillar. And of course, this comes back to Mike Robinson's reporting from many years ago on the creation, or the attempted creation, of the EU military unification project, which was based on so many pillars that had to be put in place. So let's come on to the boss herself, Ursula von der Leyen, and see what she had to say.
On security, on economy, on defending our democracies. 10 years from Brexit, our futures are as bound as ever, dear Keir. So it is in our common interest to be ambitious about our partnership, because the UK and the European Union, in fact, all of Europe, we are in this together, and we will always stick together. This is the common promise.
The common promise, call that the common purpose, because that's really the language they're talking about. But it's dear Keir. This is a love affair. But I think if I put Ursula von der Leyen in the ring with Keir Starmer, I think the lady would come out on top. Now, I've got one further clip. This is Euronews recognising the absolute breakdown of relations now between the US, NATO and the European Union. And of course, Zelensky's in the mix because he's there in Eastern Europe, stirring the pot for continued war with the Russians. But let's have a little listen.
Europe has no choice but to assume more responsibility for its own security, European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen told a security conference in Munich on Saturday as she called on European leaders to instill momentum into mutual defense commitments. Von der Leyen also referred to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's comments that Europe is not in a position to guarantee its security alone at this point. Von der Leyen said an independent Europe means not constantly leaning on someone else. She, however, called for more cooperation between the EU and the UK. Speaking about Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky described Europe not being at the negotiating table for peace talks with Russia and the US as a big mistake. Zelensky called on the EU to do more to clamp down on Russia's shadow fleet, as he expressed hope that another round of talks next week will be serious and helpful.
So the truth coming to the surface now, we have absolute chaos and mayhem unfolding in the European Union. It can't defend itself. It needs UK if it's to do anything. It can't work with the Americans. The EU project can't work with NATO. This is complete meltdown.
I'm quite enjoying watching it, to be honest with you.
I wondered what you might say to that. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a few more comments here. So it's ladies in the top job at the EU at the moment. So we've talked about Ursula. We've also got Kaya. I'm going to say Kaya. It's maybe Kaja, but Kaya sounds a little bit softer. Anyway, she's the Vice President of the European Commission, Kaya Kallas, former Prime Minister of Estonia, which is basically a Ukraine proxy. I've talked about that quite a bit previously. And she says that contrary to what some might say, woke, decadent Europe is not facing civilizational erasure. In fact, people still want to join our club, and not just fellow Europeans. Interestingly, she doesn't say that Europe isn't woke or decadent. She just says that actually we're going to be fine.
She's proud of it.
Yeah, she's
actually proud of it.
Absolutely, yes. And who are these people that want to join the club? I don't know how non-Europeans can join the European club. That seems slightly crazy, but one of them might be this guy. And this is Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who was on stage at the Munich Security Conference saying it would be an illusion to believe that this war can now be reliably ended by dividing Ukraine, i.e. entering into some kind of peace agreement with the Russians. So we've got to carry on fighting. And just as it was an illusion to believe that sacrificing Czechoslovakia would save Europe from a great war. And Zelensky, interestingly enough, did figure in the Epstein releases, there was this exchange that Epstein had with Larry Summers, the former US Treasury Secretary and president of Harvard, saying that does Zelensky even have a clue? He comes across as a typical Eastern European adventurer who trades on the theme of Ukrainian pride while being a halakhic Jew. It is clear that this is a cheap comedy for voters, but it is alarming when he starts playing this out in front of our investors.
And of course, many of those investors are absolutely cleaning up as a result of the killing and the destruction of Ukraine. So all those assets coming to the fore.
Absolutely,
it's obscene, really.
It is obscene. And we've talked about some of the investors, but who else did Epstein in particular represent? Well, in his own words, I represent the Rothschilds. And I showed this a couple of weeks ago, this release saying Ukraine upheaval should provide many opportunities, from Jeffrey Epstein to Ariane de Rothschild, one of the top leaders in the Rothschild banking dynasty, which I think is important, really critical context to what's happening in the world at the moment, and particularly at the Munich Security Conference last week.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much for that. We'll talk more about this subject in UK Column Extra, which will follow today's news. First of all, let's talk about our wonderful members and supporters. So a huge thank you to everybody that is supporting the UK Column. We can only do what we do with your financial support. And as we've been saying for quite a long time now, our aim is to grow in 2026, more content, presenters. We are really trying to do our best to make the UK Column better and bring a greater news content to our audience, and it's your support that's allowing us to do this, so thank you very much. If you're not on board, visit the website. Our famous yellow arrow says click here, and you can see the details for a monthly or an annual membership, or to make a donation, or indeed you can purchase from the shop. So if you're not on board with the UK Column as a member, please have a look at the website and certainly consider doing that. Now, what have we got tonight? The Myth of the Knight in Shining Armour as part of Germ Warfare. That's at 7:00. Retired Master Armourer Chris Dobson shares knowledge of armour history. He dispels myth while he also shines a light on intriguing history to the trade, to include the influence of secretive groups. So that sounds pretty intriguing. You might like to join that one. And also tonight at, where are we, at 9:00, we've got Carl Jarre with Dr. Warwick Powell, and they're going to be discussing a fortnight of turbulent affairs to include the sentencing of Jimmy Lai, moral devastation realised from Epstein file releases, and Japan's snap election. Also, just like to remind people that on the UK Column website is the upload of Mike Robinson and Charles Mallett's chat with Germ about China. So a lot of detail about China and why the team went to visit, and what we are learning out of that visit, and other links through to China. And we're also talking a little bit about trouble and strife within what could be described as the new media movement. But have a look at that report and you will learn more. We've also, on Tuesday at 1 p.m, that's tomorrow, in fact, got Military Matters coming out, where I've had another discussion with Charles Mallett about current military events and policy, and reflecting also back against what we can see happening in the military over time. This was a really enjoyable chat between the two of us. So if you haven't seen one of those before, get on board tomorrow at 1 p.m. And obviously it will be up on UK Column website shortly after that. Now, amongst Epstein and around Epstein, we've got this increasing breakdown and chaos in UK. I've just got a few little slides here to show people the sorts of things that come into the UK column. We are looking at what our members are saying alongside what we're reporting from bigger media organisations and indeed our own research. But this one was of interest. It came in from Alan, and it was pointing to me to a YouTube clip where a local councillor, a lady, was proudly boasting that on Valentine's Day, or prior to, she had produced some Valentine cards with her daughter, and they were then handing them out at the migrant camp at Crowborough on Saturday the 14th. And I thought to myself, my goodness, can you imagine that somebody is handing out with a daughter Valentine cards into a camp, the completely different culture for many people? What is this? Crass stupidity or ignorance or misplaced altruism? How do you rate it, Ben?
What's that term that people use? Toxic empathy.
Okay, we'll stick with that.
It feels like.
If we pop that one back on screen, I just want to bring something in over the top. Here's a Telegraph article. Small boat migrants awarded 210,000 after border agents seized their mobile phones. So a whole lot of migrants came into the country, and what happens is their phones were taken, as often happens to many people. But in this case, that results in 210,000 of compensation. And of course, once again, what the Telegraph is cleverly doing is bringing people's attention to the relatively tiny number of people who come in by rubber boats and ignores the problem of the Tony Blair in his day and there onwards, the permitted huge numbers of migrants coming into the country, which we can now see used to help destabilise and break down. That's not the fault of the migrants in the first instance, because they're being used. We've also got this one. Thank you very much for the person that identified this. This is from Declassified. And basically what this article is talking about is split loyalty, as it's emerged from Freedom of Information, that some 2,000 Brits joined the Israeli Defense Force in the horrors that went on in what many people call a massacre in Palestine. So we have people inside the country, they have split loyalty. Some of them have dual citizenship, and yet the wider body of the UK public has no idea who these people are and what their real agenda is. Are they here for the benefit of Israel, or are they here for the benefit of UK? We simply don't know. And that is, of course, why the UK column many years ago pointed out that when David Cameron said his loyalty to Israel was unshakable, it meant that we were left in the position of two masters. Which was it to be, UK or Israel? And of course, Cameron never really did explain what he was doing to the public. Now, another one that was sent in was Russia Today. UK Catholic Diocese seeks to settle 1,100 child sex abuse cases. There's already been $100 million paid out, apparently, to victims of abuse within the Catholic Church. This is in the States. But there's more to come. And of course, we're not seeing any coherent reporting across mainstream media. We've also got a grey zone report here. The spelling in Kincora was part of the original article, so I haven't changed it. There's an I missing in Kincora. But the key thing in this article is that it's talking about the clear fact that MI5, MI6 knew what was happening around the abuse of boys in Kincora home, and yet this was all covered up. And why is this so important? Well, it's important as we see it as the backdrop of the Epstein files. Meanwhile, the Institute of Government has got this headline up recently. Peter Mandelson case shows peers need stronger sanctions. So this is nothing about the failure of security which allowed Mandelson to do what he did. No, the Institute of Government, very clever, they turn it round and say effectively why we need a mechanism to remove peers who break the rules. So no investigation into what Epstein really means around Mandelson. No, this is the agenda to remove peers. And also, if we get into the article, it does provide, the Institute of Government does provide a really excellent overview of the current structure of the centre of government. But if you look, elected MPs nowhere to be seen. And this is a really accurate picture that we've now got a country run by people who are unelected, and nobody can actually pin them into a corner to say who they're really working for. And clearly the Institute of Government knows it. And then I'll just bring this one up on screen. This is a BBC article which is entitled, "Could Manchester be a Model for the UK to Kickstart Growth?" But what an incredible image to use in relation to the economic growth of a city. A group of girls, presumably high, alcohol or anything else, having a great time partying, and this is the banner for a headline on economic growth. Utterly crazy. So, Ben, over to you, because the turbulence and chaos is clearly created in the country at the moment, and people need to see through it to see where the real danger's coming from the restructuring of government and society.
Absolutely. And that hard centre at the middle of government that you just put up there, I think was really interesting, because that is actually that's where the power lies, ultimately. And we're going to talk about this concept of divide and rule more over the coming weeks. And it's just a model that I've put together to describe the division, the polarisation, the increasing polarisation that we're seeing in our society. And this is being pushed down into society from the top. It's deliberate. And we're being split out into these essentially warring factions. So you've got on the right-hand side, like the right wing, white, masculine, not men necessarily, but more masculine, more individualistic, native, rural, conservative, Christian, that I've put in exclamation marks because it's not necessarily Christian, but people who appeal to Christian heritage. You hear that a lot. They don't actually talk about Christianity. They just put pictures of churches up and say, well, we're sort of Christian. And aligned to Israel, I think that's very important. And then on the left-hand side, the counterpoint to that, we have black, feminine / women, immigrant, urban, progressive, Islamic or increasingly Islamic, who has sided with Palestine, but actually I've put that in exclamation marks because the people who are driving the left-wing agenda are not actually on the side of the Palestinian people. They're just using them as a way to generate this chaos and antagonism and divide and rule in the country that allows the establishment to progress its agenda. And the establishment currently is aligned with the left-hand side of this diagram. And you can think how the traditional political parties would fit onto this model. If you can look on the right-hand side, that would be the Conservatives. The left-hand side would be Labour. In more recent times, you could think that Reform would be on the right-hand side and the Green parties would be on the left. But into this heady mix of new political movements across the UK, we've got a brand new political party that's launched over the weekend. It's Restore Britain. It's led by Rupert Lowe, the MP for Great Yarmouth. And we've got a short clip here launching the party to the country.
I have chosen to speak to you today from the farm because places like this represent what proper Britain is about. Hard work, responsibility, effort, duty, stewardship. This is the England I know, and this is the England that I love. On a farm, you don't think in election cycles or headlines or polling. You think in seasons. You think in generations, in what you leave behind to those who come after you. And that's why, here on the farm, I am now launching Restore Britain as a national political party. I'm now going to dedicate my life to finding, organising, funding, and providing hundreds of qualified candidates to present to the British people at the next general election.
So a new political party, Restore Britain, was an advocacy group launched last year, about 7 months ago, and it's now relaunched itself as a political party. Rupert Lowe is leading it. Rupert Lowe, formerly of Reform, he left due to differences of opinion, shall we say, with Nigel Farage. As that video was running, Brian just commented to me, it's Farage 2.0. I think that was probably quite astute, actually. So what do we have here? We got The Farm, right? So this is a rural proposition from proper Britain, which is about seasons and generations and legacy. And Lowe is going to be finding, organising and funding political candidates, hundreds of them, to run in the next general election. So this is very emphatically a political action, right? So they're going to try and take power in the country, ultimately. The video goes on. It's about 7 minutes long. We'll put a link to it so you can watch the whole thing. He talks in particular about reversing mass immigration. He wants to detain and deport illegal immigrants in particular. He's saying that millions will go. He wants to get the nation back to work. He wants to punish indolence and reward hard work. He says that the state has definitively become the enemy of the people, which I would tend to agree with. There's something that we say here a lot on the UK column. And he says that Britain is a people, our people, which, again, I agree with a lot of the sentiment here. He appeals to Christianity. This is what I'm talking about. He shows a picture of a church, but doesn't actually show any Christians. I think that's quite interesting. And it's explicitly anti-Islam. So he wants to ban the burqa, ban Sharia law, ban halal, and interestingly, he does mention kosher slaughter as well, and he calls these ritualistic forms of slaughter. And this is the platform that they've gone out on. Now, there's already been quite a bit of debate about the electoral prospects of a new nationalist party in the country. I was particularly interested in this letter, which was published a few weeks ago, about a month ago, by Nick Griffin, the former leader of the BNP. We'll provide a link so you can go and read the whole thing yourself. And this, again, is ahead of the launch that we've just seen over the weekend, where he says, I take the liberty of writing purely with regards to a single issue, your proposal that a large number of patriots should contest the next general election, which is what Lowe has just said he's going to do, right? Whether this would be on behalf of Restore Britain or as independent nationalists seems unclear at present, but in either case, it would be an act of electoral suicide. My emphasis, right, I've put that in bold, but I think that's an important point. And Nick Griffin probably knows more than most about this, the amount of time and money and energy that the BNP put into trying to win seats around the country, and a lot of that delivering next to nothing in terms of political influence. He then goes on to say, in the event that Reform actually win the contest, it would become even more important that you, Rupert Lowe, are returned in Great Yarmouth. We both know Farage and how he will inevitably betray much of the trust put in him by the British people. Our country needs you in Parliament. So this essentially is a positive communication to Rupert Lowe saying we need you in Parliament and we need you to hold Farage's feet to the fire, assuming he becomes the next PM, to act as a rallying point within the House around whom MPs who encourage to favour can regroup. There's much more to this letter. Yeah. I think I've been following Nick Griffin a lot recently. I think he talks a lot of sense. As I say, he's very experienced in terms of electoral politics here in the UK. And I would tend to agree with his first statement that actually running loads of nationalists against Reform. We talked a lot recently about Reform and the fact that it's, essentially it's already begun to collapse with the introduction of all of these former Tory ministers and a lot of Farage's positions on anything from migration to economic policy. But is Rupert Lowe entering the fray here and running hundreds of candidates around the UK, requiring tens of millions of pounds of just money before you get into the man hours and the legwork required to make that actually viable? It seems like an extraordinary a level of investment. And also, it's still 3.5 years out, right?
Yeah, indeed. I'd just like to respond to some of that, Ben, because I can imagine that there are people out there saying, well, where do we look to? Where do we put our hope that somebody is going to stand up? And this is the weakness, is that ultimately the change to what is happening around us has to come from each and every person standing up and not being there and waiting for one of these new leaders to emerge who is going to change everything. And the next thing for Mr. Lowe is, what is he actually talking about? Is he talking about the policies that have been used to destroy the country, where those policies have come from, who were the individuals who created the policy? No, we don't talk about any of that. We just use the emotive nationalistic terms in order to bring people to his banner, but he's not getting to grips with who's actually doing the damage in the country and why. And the other thing that many people are saying is a lot of support for his new, for Mr. Lowe and his new party coming in from Israel. And so what are we now dealing with? Are we dealing with a truly independent political initiative, or have we got more layers in the background? It's until these layers are brought to the surface and the public can see who is circling around trying to take power, we're never going to be able to deal with it. So in the first instance, the people who've got to make the change, it's us, it's inside ourselves. It's not sitting and waiting for somebody in a new political party to be able to, tackle what's happening.
Yeah.
Just felt the need to bring that in, Ben, because I think so many people, they don't want to get into the battle. They just want to sit and wait for somebody else to take the lead.
Someone else to come and fix it. In 3 years' time, when actually a lot of the policy issues that we're struggling with, absolutely, yes. I mean, if you think that things are bad now, 3 years down the track, it's going to be exponentially worse. Just a few more things to flag up. So Brian just mentioned Israel. Lowe has made several statements very pro-Israel. This one from 2024 saying our cowardly government must find the courage to stand with Israel. We must support them however we can. So he's been on the record on this stuff. He has done some good work running the independent rape gang inquiry, which ran through January. And some of the testimony coming out of this was absolutely harrowing. It's been seen across social media. We'll provide a link for you to go and have a look at the website. And in his own words, Lowe set this up because he was so frustrated with the lack of action on the rape gangs and Labour's failure to establish a national investigation. He crowdfunded over £600,000 to start this as an independent inquiry. Now, I don't want to trivialise this in any sense. And we've spoken about the issue with rape gangs in the north of England extensively. I interviewed Raja Mir on this exact topic almost exactly a year ago. But I will say that this is a much bigger issue. It's not just about Islam. It's not just about men called Mohammed. It's endemic across the whole of British society, from the top to the bottom, and presenting it as just relating to one ethnic group, I think is misleading. I would say
it's deliberately misleading, Ben, because you can see certainly on social media, people jumping on this bandwagon. They want to get on board with a simplistic idea that the whole problem is the grooming gangs. But if we take our reports on Fenethy, tens of thousands of little girls went through an abusive education system up there in Scotland. No coherent police investigation into what's taken place. If we look at Kincora, when the security services were clearly aware and involved of the abuse of little boys, most likely for that compromising information or photographs in order to control people. Lowe's not going to go near any of this. He's not going to go into the family courts and the stealing of children. He's not going to look at documentation north of the border, which says actually the children under the child protection system in Scotland and indeed across UK are at greater risk of being abused than those who are not. He's not going to deal with that because he wants the public to be sucked into an agenda that it's simply the rape gangs that are part of the system. And we've even seen people reporting that basically it's the powerful links between the rape gangs which form the abuse culture, when in fact it is a known and well-established fact that being part of a child abuse system is a club And it doesn't matter what your professional status is. It doesn't matter whether you're white or black or your religion. If you're interested in abusing children, you're in the club and you will work with them, work with other people to obtain those children. You will also work with other people to protect them from prosecution. So this is a very, very dangerous line. And Ben, I absolutely agree. It appears that this man is helping to drive people into the divide that you showed with your two arrows at the beginning of your segment.
Certainly seems to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, so more on Lowe, heavily backed by Elon Musk. So Musk has come out saying you've got to join Rupert Lowe and restore Britain because he's the only one who will actually do it. Musk, who was desperate to go to Epstein's island, was never invited. Potentially now going to be ploughing money into restore Britain, having fallen out with Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe has said, by the way, that he hasn't had any kind of external investment. So I should just point that out. Also, interestingly, quite a bit of back and forth between Rupert Lowe and Jeremy Clarkson. So there seems to be some suggestion that he might join Restore Britain as a candidate over the coming weeks. If that does happen, I think Jeremy Clarkson probably needs to answer some questions about his relationship with the other members of the Chipping Norton set, Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire, which includes, amongst many others, David Cameron, who launched the Big Society, Matthew Freud, who launched the Sustainable Development Goals and currently runs the Sustainable Markets Initiative for the King, because I haven't actually heard Jeremy Clarkson calling out any of these people at any point about their policies. And just as a final point on Rupert Lowe, should just point out that he's also an investor in this thing, which is Kona Energy, delivering the zero carbon future. There's the farm, look, there's the farm. It's covered in batteries. Is that what he means when he says farm? Because he seems to be queuing himself up to make quite a bit of money from the great energy transition, which is part of the global transformation agenda. There he is on the right-hand side. So call me cynical, I don't know, but I'm a little bit sceptical about where he's going with all this stuff. Anyway, I will just whip through. I've got a bit more to talk about, but not much time. But I think it's important that we have a little look at what's going on the other side of that diagram as well. As we talked about the right and Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain, who is the counterpoint today that I'm going to talk about is this guy. It is our esteemed Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, there on the right-hand side. And I've just got three things that he's been doing over the past 2 weeks to give you a sense of what the left is up to, right? So here he is on stage with Kunal Shah, the co-CEO of Goldman Sachs International. So these are the people that I think Sadiq Khan is really governing for in London.
Just a coincidence.
He accidentally walked through the door and sat down, and the guy was just sat there. Who knew? But and what else is Khan doing? So he just launched this thing, the You Are Loved and Wanted Here initiative. Yeah, so you think about the right v left diagram that I talked about before, the natives versus the immigrants. He is absolutely on the side of the immigrants, and it's all presented in this kind of feminine, caring, altruistic, empathetic manner. There are 30 of these things all around London, and this is backed by £1.8 million investment from the Mayor of London. He claims ownership of this. This is taxpayer money, but actually it's come from him. This is real tin pot dictator stuff that we're looking at here. What else has he been doing? He's been turning on the lights for Ramadan in central London. He's also been at the launch of the British Muslim Trust, which is a new organisation which has just launched in the past 2 weeks, which is about ending hatred and amplifying hope. Yeah, so what do we just...
Hope is the danger.
Yes.
Hope does not actually take you anywhere. It doesn't actually do anything.
Right.
It's action is what people need, not the hope.
Exactly. And we've just seen Rupert Lowe presenting child rape as a purely Islamic issue, and then the counterpoint to that is an increase in hate incidents that Sadiq Khan can get excited about. And you see there the tension between those two things creating this chaos and conflict in society. This is run by this lady who is this Akila Ahmed MBE. For too long, anti-Muslim hate has been under-recognised and under-reported. BMT exists to change that. So we've got to report this stuff more, basically, to create a narrative around it. And it's chaired by this guy, Shabir Andari, CBE, who says that tackling anti-Muslim hatred is essential to building safer, more inclusive communities. And this is the point about the establishment, because as you can see there, he's got a CBE and he's also a trustee of the King's Trust International, which is overseen by Lloyd Dorfman, CBE, who used to run Travelex, really wealthy guy. And then you can see Shabir Randery, CBE, who's on the chair of the International Board of the King's Trust. And just, you know, without labouring the point too much, the King is that guy. You see him there on the right-hand side?
I felt you needed to say that in case people thought the King's Trust was some sort of other name. No, we're talking about the man himself.
Exactly, that king. So he's backing Khan and this whole nexus on the left-hand side of this diagram. And I do like this quote from Aristotle, which is, "It is a mark of a tyrant to have men of foreign extraction rather than citizens as guests at table and companions, feeling that citizens are hostile, but strangers make no claim against him." I think that says quite a bit about old Charlie Boy. And then also, our friend Shabir Randery is also a trustee at the Windsor Leadership Group, which is based at Windsor Castle. So again, this is absolutely establishment with a bunch of other grandees, former BBC people. And this organisation was actually mentioned in this article from Martin Edwards from 2016, Leadership Training for a Common Purpose. The Windsor Leaders Group is referenced in this article, and actually Common Purpose, I think, is absolutely in the mix of this, which appears to be something that Rupert Lowe knows something about too. Let's just have a little listen to this final clip. Okay, well, we don't have the clip there about Rupert Lowe talking about common purpose, but we'll bring that into extra. And then just to reiterate, this is what I think that we're looking at. I'm going to talk about this more over the coming weeks. And by the way, people in the chat box getting excited about the fact that you don't necessarily align to or agree with all of these points. It's not about you necessarily. This is about mass media, mass political communication, and the division of the society so that the establishment agenda embodied by the king, embodied by the civil service, can drive through in the background. And that is what we're seeing playing out, I believe, right now. And the people that we've just talked about, Rupert Lowe and Sadiq Khan, are playing their roles in this whole heady mix.
Yeah. Ben, thank you very much for that. We will do more in extra time for those UK column members. But before we get there, I just wanted to play a little video clip to remind people that on Friday, Patrick Henningsen did a very good report from Tehran in Iran. And what happened very quickly thereafter? Well, the BBC did an exclusive from Iran. Let's just have a look at two tiny bits of clip juxtaposed.
And also be able to inspect the damage sites from the unprovoked Israeli attack on Iran last June, and of course the unprovoked U.S. attack, Operation Midnight Hammer, as it's called, and to inspect some of the damage of that. We might talk more about that in subsequent reports.
The ball is in America's court. I mean, they have to prove that they want to have a deal with us, and if there is a sincerity, if we see a sincerity on their part, I'm sure that we will be on a road to have an agreement. We are ready to discuss this and other issues related to our program, provided that they are ready also to talk about the sanctions. Because sanctions, as we call it, illegal sanctions, those sanctions have to be also on the table.
So two clips, and I have 2 points. One is absolutely fantastic that Patrick Henderson was able to get out and report from Tehran, and credit to Patrick for doing that. And then surprisingly, the BBC seemed to be caught out because they had to do an exclusive report from Iran. But notice that the BBC reporter wearing a headscarf, and yet only a few years ago the BBC was trying to stir up trouble inside Iran by telling Iranian women, quite right, you shouldn't be wearing headscarves. So utter malicious hypocrisy from the BBC, and what a contrast in the two styles of reporting. But of course, the BBC, with its billions still left in funding, obviously gets access to government ministers, which are very difficult for the UK column to do. We'll leave you with the thought of that good news. BBC 600 million short due to 300,000 households saying, no, the BBC is not for us. Really does demonstrate what people can do when they act together in a very simple way. Ben, thank you very much for joining me. We will leave it there. If you're a member of UK Column, stay with us. We'll have UK Column Extra in a few moments. Everybody who's watched us, whether you're in the UK, worldwide, thank you for joining the column. UK Column News will be back at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.